Further, discharging.
3,840 federal agents, 6,600 arrests, 74 major narcotics loads seized, a multi-million-dollar pipeline exposed. Stay with me because the real crime wasn't just what was buried underground. December 6 a.m. Arizona. No sirens, no speeches, just tires on wet pavement and unmarked vehicles moving in clean spacing. Like a convoy that practiced the route in the dark. For years, the public picture looked simple. Fences, patrols, cameras, a hard line. On the surface, Arizona wakes up like any other morning: porch lights, empty intersections, trucks rolling early. Then a routine thread pulls loose. Beneath the ground, teams uncover 6 reinforced tunnels running from Mexico into the United States. Not crude holes. These are built to work. Concrete walls, lighting, ventilation, and rails designed to move weight fast and quietly, the way legitimate freight moves above ground. At the exits, containers sit staged like normal cargo, sealed, labeled, timed. When agents open what they can, they find volume. Bulk product and cash bundles packaged to look like paperwork, the kind of thing that disappears into the background if nobody stops it long enough to ask questions. Analysts run throughput and the case turns cold. The corridor was capable of moving 2.88 tons per month into Arizona before it ever touched a street corner. That's where this stops being a border story. Those underground routes are only the entry lane. They don't explain how the load becomes invisible after it crosses. So the case follows the second layer: warehouses, dispatch offices, cargo yards, transfer points, places built for speed, where everything looks routine by design. This network doesn't rely on noise. It relies on normal. Shift changes, access badges, load schedules, label printers, scanner lanes, small controls that can steer a shipment without a meeting, without a phone call, without anyone raising a voice. A machine like that is built with redundancy on purpose. If one route is watched, another opens. If one load is seized, another is already moving. If one handoff fails, the schedule adjusts, and the next handoff still looks on time. That's why a statewide hit has to move fast and quiet. The system survives on warning, and warning spreads in seconds. Phones vibrate, screens go dark, drivers vanish, locks change. A route gets rewritten somewhere you cannot see. So at 6 a.m., the operation moves like a single coordinated breath across the state. The goal is not drama. The goal is to freeze the flow before it can pivot. Early in the notes, one detail keeps reappearing like a fingerprint. This wasn't built like a street hustle. It was built like logistics. And that leads to a name that doesn't sound like a person so much as a role. El Arquitecto, not a shooter, not a celebrity. A designer, someone who understands routes, timing windows, and procedures well enough to make illegal freight look indistinguishable from legal freight. By the time the first doors are hit, the government already knows the underground routes are real. What they still don't know is the harder question: how many ordinary points in the system were quietly turned into switches? If it could move that kind of volume each month, then the underground routes may be the most visible part and not the most important part. Subscribe for the full breakdown, because the next part isn't about tunnels. It's about the insiders who made the system run on schedule. For federal teams, one conclusion hardened. This was not just smuggling. It was an organized infiltration of American infrastructure. Officials warned that if it wasn't stopped, millions more doses would keep pouring into U.S. cities month after month, because the threat was no longer limited to the border. It had spread into airports, warehouses, trucking routes, and routines inside legitimate systems. By the time evidence converged 6 tunnels, the pipeline, bribed airport workers, and the shadowy figure known as El Arquitecto leadership reached one decision. Arizona was facing the largest cartel infiltration in its history. At 6:03 a.m. After weeks of planning inside a secure command center, the United States launched a massive coordinated action, Operation Desert Citadel. It would become the biggest federal raid ever conducted in Arizona. 3,840 agents from the FBI, DEA, HSI, CBP, U.S. Marshals, and state tactical units deployed across the state. Targets: 176 locations tied to the distribution chain, stash houses, warehouse fronts, corrupted transportation hubs, safe apartments, shell company offices. Every team had a narrow window minutes to strike. The network's advantage was speed. If suspects were warned or evidence destroyed, the system could collapse into silence before teams reached the core. The state was still in pre-dawn quiet. Black Hawk helicopters moved over Phoenix and Tucson, circling above neighborhoods where supervisors lived quietly in rented homes. Down below, armored vehicles rolled through residential streets, engines echoing off walls that usually only heard sprinklers and commuter traffic. Teams stacked at doors and waited for a single signal. When it came, entries hit in synchronized waves. Metal doors were forced open. Evidence teams pushed in behind the first line. Digital teams moved immediately to secure devices before screens could be wiped. Inside stash houses, most suspects weren't on guard. They were asleep because the business model was blending in. Some tried back doors. Some tried rooftops. Containment teams were already positioned to cut routes off before they started. In a warehouse outside Mesa, agents encountered a fortified loading area lined with crates marked as agricultural equipment. When officers broke them open, they found blocks of fentanyl wrapped in heat-sealed plastic, stacked like bricks and staged like inventory. At several hubs, the risk level jumped. In a converted auto shop on the north side of Phoenix, authorities reported armed resistance from guards protecting a shipment scheduled to move that morning. Tactical teams contained the scene quickly, using smoke to gain entry and secure the interior. Inside, teams documented an improvised packaging station scales, sealing equipment, protective suits, and nearly $1 million spread across folding tables. Every inch of the building reflected the precision agents associate with the designer's layout, workflow, timing windows, and the way everything was placed to move fast and then disappear. Operation Desert Citadel delivered a decisive blow. But in systems built on redundancy, the first night is only the opening move. 8 inches the morning, Lower Manhattan. While the compound is still being cleared, the task force hits the next node. A financial services office with frosted glass and a lobby that smells like coffee. Because this network does not survive on fear alone, it survives on paperwork. Agents move through the suite with a single goal: seize the infrastructure that makes the money disappear. Servers, accounting ledgers, encrypted storage devices, and the donor database. They find it faster than expected. A private room behind an executive conference table. No windows. A locked rack of drives. And a printed sheet taped to the inside of a cabinet door. Transfer protocol. Step by step. Donation in. Vendor out. Shell in. Crypto out. Offshore in. New nonprofit out. The loop is not sloppy. It is practiced. And it is massive. A quick poll shows 2,800 recurring donors on autopay. Another one, 9,000 donors, triggered by televised appeals. And a separate category labeled emergency surge that spikes after every public tragedy, every hurricane, every national headline that makes people feel helpless. Sympathy converted into speed. In the same hour, 10:12 in the morning. Newark, New Jersey. A customs brokerage firm near the freight terminals. It is the kind of place no one talks about. A company that files, forms, stamps, manifests, clears containers, and makes the global supply chain look clean. Federal agents do not storm the front. They lock the exits first. Because if the paperwork runs, the network runs. Inside, they pull printed manifests from the last 90 days. And they see the disguise. Humanitarian supplies, medical donations, relief goods. Same categories, same phrasing, same vendor name. Graybridge Relief Logistics. The manifests claim pallets of blankets and boxed food. But when agents open the containers that are still on site, The top layer is exactly what the paperwork promised. The bottom layer is not. Vacuum-sealed bricks, powder packaged in uniform weight, and wrapped bundles that match the same tape found in the orphanage office. This is how the network stayed invisible. The top layer is virtue. The bottom layer is profit. A supervisor is brought into a back office. He does not resist. He does not deny. He asks one question. How much do you already know? Agents do not answer. They slide a printed photo across the desk. Sister Fatima Grace. His face changes before he says a word. Because at this point the director is no longer a symbol. She is a logistics manager. And she is still out there. Back in New York, evidence teams at the compound find the proof that ties every node together. A set of binders labeled not with names, but with dates. Each binder contains 2 lists. Our problems and the Fowler-James XO DAFE. Inbound. Outbound. Inbound is donations. Outbound is destinations. Storage units in 4 states. Short-term rentals in 11 cities. A chain of small clinics with matching ownership paperwork. And 1 private airfield in Pennsylvania listed under a shell company with no operating history. The network is not just moving product. It is moving people. It is moving them through places that appear legitimate on paper. And then the most important discovery hits. A hard drive labeled Archive. Inside, a folder called Shepherd. It is not religious. It is operational. A roster of 146 names. Each name paired with a code, a date, and a destination marker. Agents do not read it out loud. They do not need to. They understand the purpose in silence. This is not a charity record. This is a shipping ledger for human lives. Now the task force has to do the one thing that every major case requires. Stop the next movement before it happens. They pull live toll data again. They pull camera feeds again. They pull cell tower pings around the orphanage, around the finance office, around the customs firm, and one device lights up repeatedly, moving fast. Sister Fatima Grace is not hiding in a church basement. She is not praying. She is running. 11:36 inches the morning. Westchester County. A black SUV cuts through traffic in a lane that does not match the speed limit. Air support picks it up. Unmarked units follow at distance. Inside the SUV, a driver, a second passenger, and a locked case in the rear that agents later confirm held multiple burner phones and cash. The SUV heads toward the Pennsylvania line, toward that private airfield. The move is almost clean. Almost. Because the task force has one advantage the network does not expect. They seize the donor database. And inside that database is a live alert system used to trigger emergency fundraising campaigns. It is scheduled. Tonight, a new surge message drafted and ready to send. The subject line is built to pull the heart. Urgent. Protect the children. Keep them safe. It is not a plea. It is a cover. It is designed to distract the public while the next shipment moves. And now the clock is back on the wall. The compound fell. The money note is cracked. The logistics lane is exposed. But the director is still in motion, and the next movement is already scheduled. 1:04 inches the afternoon. Pennsylvania. A private airfield surrounded by winter trees and silent hangars. From the road, it looks like nothing. A strip of pavement. A small office. A few aircraft that could belong to anyone. That is why it works. Because the most effective hiding places in America are the ones that look like routine. Air support circles high enough to be invisible from the ground. Unmarked units stage a mile out, engines off, watching the entrance gate like it is the only door left in the country. Then the black SUV appears. It does not rush. It slows, like it belongs there. The driver flashes a badge at the gate that looks official from a distance. The guard hesitates, then lifts the arm. The SUV rolls through, and at that exact moment, the task force moves. 2 vehicles seal the gate from the outside. Another cuts the access road behind the hangars. A 4th swings wide to block the runway end, because you do not chase a plane after it is airborne. Inside the airfield office, a small group of staff freeze in place when they see the vests and the rifles. They are not criminals. They are workers who never asked questions. This is another layer of the system. Use ordinary people. Keep them uninformed. And if the truth ever shows up, let them say the same thing. We had no idea. Agents move fast but controlled. They separate employees from the hangar line. They check every room for weapons. They secure the flight logs before anyone can reach a shredder. And then they go straight to the only hangar with fresh tire marks in front of it. Inside, the space is lit by a single row of overhead bulbs. A twin-engine aircraft sits ready. Fuel cap closed. Cargo hatch unlocked. And next to the plane, Sister Fatima Grace stands with her coat still on, as if she plans to be gone before anyone can say her name out loud. She is not praying. She is not pleading. She is negotiating with time. The moment she sees the agents, she takes one step back, not toward the office, toward the aircraft. That is when the entry team closes the distance. One voice cuts through the hangar. Federal agents. Do not move. She stops. Not because she respects the command, because she realizes the runway is already blocked. The driver reaches for his waistband. He never clears leather. He is taken down hard and fast, pinned on the concrete before the decision can become a tragedy. The second passenger tries to run for the cargo hatch. He makes it 6 steps. Then he is on the ground too. And Sister Fatima Grace, the face on the donation mailers, the woman who stood under stained glass asking America for mercy, is placed in cuffs in a cold hangar on a quiet airfield. This is what the cameras never show. The end of a lie is rarely dramatic. It is procedural. Now the real work begins. Because arresting the director is not the same as collapsing the machine. Inside the SUV, agents recover the locked case they tracked earlier. It contains multiple burner phones, bundled cash, a set of forged identity documents, and a handwritten sheet folded into a tight square. It is not a prayer. It is a checklist. Flight time, fuel stop, alternate airfields, cash handoff location, and a single word written twice, underlined, Shepard. Back in New York, analysts open the seized server rack from the finance office. They already have the donor database. Now they have the back end. The first thing they find is a calendar. Tonight was not just a surge message. It was a timed diversion. The surge campaign was built to light up phones across the country at the same moment a scheduled movement was supposed to happen. The next movement, the word Shepherd, was not symbolic. It was a route designed to look like rescue while functioning like extraction. Then the numbers start to fall into place. The roster of 146 names is not the full scale. It is a snapshot. Investigators identify additional ledgers in the archive folder, stored under dull labels like inventory and compliance. Under those labels are dates and destinations that match the manifests at the customs brokerage firm. And then they find something that turns a case into a national crisis. A network map, not hand-drawn, generated by the system itself. Nodes, routes, payment processors, warehouses, storage units, and what the system calls shelters. When analysts overlay the map with federal data, the pattern becomes obvious. This was not a local operation. This was not a single orphanage. This was a logistics architecture built to scale. In 11 cities, investigators identify linked properties with the same ownership fingerprints. In 4 states, they flag identical vendor payment patterns tied to the same shell structure. And in 1 week of accelerated warrants, they move in on the remaining nodes. Not with a single dramatic raid, with a coordinated collapse. Storage units are opened, short-term rentals are cleared, clinics are inspected, trailers are seized at freight yards, and the system begins to lose what it needs most: time. Because once the paperwork is exposed, the disguises stop working. A container labeled relief goods is no longer trusted. A transfer labeled medical supplies is no longer routine. A donor message that says protect the children becomes evidence, not a plea. By the end of that week, the task force announces the scope. More than 5,400 arrests across the network, including brokers, recruiters, enforcers, and financial handlers. More than 28 tons of narcotics seized across multiple jurisdictions. More than $7.2 million in cash recovered in initial counts. and thousands of devices and documents taken for analysis, because the system did not just move people and product, it recorded everything. But the most important outcome is not the arrests. It is the survivors. Medical teams establish protective care sites. Caseworkers coordinate with federal victim services. Investigators build a timeline for every person they can identify, because rescue is not complete until you can answer the questions that follow. Who are you? Where did you come from? Who is looking for you? And who tried to erase you? The director's story also collapses under scrutiny. Her public biography claimed she rose from poverty and devoted her life to compassion. Investigators confirm parts of it. She was once a caregiver. Once, then the donations grew. Then the media attention grew. Then the checks got bigger. And somewhere along that rise, the mission changed. It did not change overnight. It changed in increments. First an extra security contract, then a vendor deal that made no sense, then a logistics partnership that promised efficiency.